So I don't know if you can see this, but all my talks, all of my slides, all of my demos, all of pretty much everything I do in public out on GitHub. So if you want to go out to GitHub, it's CodeBytes, and you can find like all my talks about Azure Resiliency and Aspire and AI and feature flags and SRE. Like you can just go out there and look at them. This talk in particular is out there, and you can see all my demos, but all my slides are there also. So I do all my slides in VS Code in Markdown, so they're all here. I mean, you can see all the raw stuff. I use Font Awesome for the icons. I'll do MARP, which are the slide types. I'll do embedded mermaid and draw IO files. Like it's a fun little thing. And then when I check in code, I have a pipeline that runs and updates my slides, which you can see I was just pushing a couple minutes ago, making slide changes. I just don't like having to deal with PowerPoint. I just want to live in VS Code. So I think we're at time. We can get started. I think I've wasted enough of your time babbling. My name's Chris Ayers. I'm a senior software engineer at Microsoft. I work in Azure. So Azure is part of CXP. Like I'm part of Azure engineering. And anytime there's an outage or incident at Microsoft, like we're doing analysis. In fact, I write AI tools to analyze outages and incidents, and I look at ways we can make Azure better. But I started this talk a long time ago when I was a consultant. Speaking is not part of my day job. It's just something I like to do. I like to learn things and share them with people. I'm on all the socials, some less, a lot less now than I used to. But yeah, connect, we'll chat. I want to talk about like what's configuration, like how did framework handle it. Like if you don't know where we came from, it's hard to appreciate where we are. And then I'm going to dive into a whole bunch of different topics that will like take you from the ground up, and we're going to look at how to test and how Aspire does things. But like when I talk about configuration, I usually talk about 2 or 3 things that all kind of get conflated together. But when I'm dealing with modern.NET and configuration, it doesn't matter. In my code, I can handle them all similarly. So maybe it's a setting that is a value that is non-secret, that I don't really care about, that's something I can set at runtime or compile time or something else, something like maybe retry times or queue length. Maybe I have some feature flags, and I want to start implementing feature flags where I can progressively turn on a feature or turn it off, and I might want to be able to do that in different ways. That might be another instance of configuration or a secret. I'm sure we all have them, connection strings, identities, things like that. And I've actually moved away from connection strings almost entirely. I pretty much just use managed identities now. Like I don't even really use Key Vault anymore. Everything's RBAC in Azure. I mean, I'll touch on that a little bit. But historically, when we did configuration, who remembers having, or maybe they still do you have a dev branch and a QA branch and a production branch, and you cherry pick between them or merge between them and you hate life? Do you know that what you're building on in dev is not what you're testing in QA, is not what you're running in prod? Those branches have diverged long ago. I don't care how diligent you are. They start having small differences and changes. And so I am a huge advocate of build it once, deploy it many times with only configuration changes between them. Like the bits should be the same bits everywhere. But if you're building 3 times, those are 3 different bits, most likely. But this was something that we used to do all the time. We'd have checked in a QA config and a prod config or a release config, and we'd build it and it would get baked into the binary, and that would get deployed to one server. Like, who's done that? Well, isn't that great? Don't you miss the good old days? No. The way on the right is how we do everything nowadays. It really is best practice. Like if you can, you build it once and you move those bits through environments with configuration. And so that configuration can be a config file, can be environment variables, can be whatever. Let's take a quick look at how .NET did it. Well, we had key value pairs. Everything was a key value pair. Everything's like a string. We had the static configuration manager class. Who likes testing static classes? Yeah, nobody. So we would wrap it, right? You'd wrap it with like this class, and you put an interface on it so you could inject it, and then you could like do a test configuration and inject that to test. Annoying. We also had slow cheetah. Slow cheetah was great. Like if you would have to learn the XSLT translation language. So we had our, yeah, here we go. New mouse. We had our app settings. We would add keys with stuff in them. Those are strings. And then we would like do this configuration language. We're like, hey, we're gonna configure this, like, and we're gonna tweak the transform on the connection string when it matches the name annoying. And then we would have this configuration manager app setting greeting. Like we would just get it out of that static class. Joy, right? So much fun. And testing it and making sure you did the right one. Yeah, let's look at modern.NET. All the problems get solved. So in modern.NET, there's a couple of things. There's configuration sources, there's configuration providers, and configuration builders. So when we talk about sources, when I say there's a configuration source, that's like, hey, I have a JSON file. I'm sure in your project you've seen app settings.json or app settings.development.json. Those are two different sources. They might use the same provider, JSON, but they're two different sources. You might have environment variables. You might have configuration, like command line variables. You might have key vaults or app settings, or I mean app config. You might have Cosmos. You might make your own custom configuration provider. You can do that. But these get loaded in, and they get processed in order by the configuration builder, and then you get this configuration object. So it doesn't matter if I'm getting some from environment or some from a JSON file or some from my user secrets or some from my key vault. At the end of the day, everything's configuration. So how I access it is the same. Now, as an example, let's say I have a JSON file that has something like, hey, I'm in dev, I have a local host, and then I have an environment variable. It's like, hey, here's my database connection string. And then I'm going to override by command line my log level. Well, at the end of the day, you know, it's going to collapse those. It's going to give you like last one in wins type of thing. Like there is an order of precedence, and we'll talk about that. But it builds all those into one configuration. Now, we also get strongly typed variables. So if we had a strongly typed variable, like we have settings with our nested settings, and we add in our JSON, we can get back a class. Like a real class. We don't have to do all the parsing. We don't have to do all that. And I'm going to talk about validation later. But we get validation. And we support nested objects, like on the left. So we have multiple levels of binding objects that we can leverage. And then, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more as well, when we have hierarchies of settings, those keys get flattened. Everything is just one key. There's no like extra delimiters and all that. It's all just one string. But in .NET, we use colons to separate that. Now, if we're doing environment variables, we'll talk about it, but they'll use double underscores. On platforms that don't like colons after letters, I don't know any platforms that don't really like colons after letters, other than Windows. So we're going to have nesting configuration values. Now, if I just do .NET new, you know, .NET new console, I don't get any configuration. I'm going to show you that. If I use the generic host, so I'm using like the app host runtime and the generic hosting, I get a whole bunch of stuff, just like I get with ASP. So I get JavaScript or JSON files, I get user secrets, I get environment support. And I'll show you guys these as we dig in, but like if you just make .NET new console and you start building a basic application, you got to add in configuration support. I already mentioned we have a whole bunch. The fun one is INI for me. Like I'm like, really? We implemented that in modern.NET to support. So we got INI files, we got keeper files, XML, we got all sorts of stuff around command line, which I'll show you some cool tips and tricks on that. And we'll also talk about key vault and app config in some demos. But, and I don't know if you can read that, but it's a pretty simple package to add. Microsoft extensions configuration JSON. And then you can give it things like, here's the file I want you to load, here's some variables, we can make it optional, we can do reloading. If I wanted to do XML, the exact same. just now I'm in XML or INI. So like, once I get the settings in, my system doesn't care. Even environment variables. We can use environment variables in our config very, very easily, but notice the delimitors here are double underscore. Like this is something we just kind of have to deal with potentially if we're going to be setting environment variables and we want to have some hierarchy. And I'll show you guys these. There's also baked in environment variables. Has anyone used app service on Azure? Looked at the configuration tab? You might see that there's like ASP.NET underscore or ASP.NET Core underscore or .NET underscore. Those are ways that you can pass environment variables into the runtime and configure it, like as it's running in an app host. You can also like use some other type of configuration values, and you can make your own custom prefixes. So you can make your own environment sections for yourself. So let's go play with these some. Like I said, if I just do like a .NET new, I get no configuration. If I want to change this, I pretty much have to go in here and hack it. But if I do the generic host, so this is the extensions hosting, host, create application, I actually have config loaded into the system. I could do like host configuration, I could access that. Like these app settings are going to be passed in. And I can access that configuration just by using a generic host. But let's just take the basic console and kind of move from scratch. If I want to add configuration, I've got to add one class or one or two extensions here. I'm going to do extensions configuration. So it's in my system. And then I picked config.json just because I want it to be different than app settings to show you that it can be whatever you want. It's just a convention that you get. But I'm going to add my JSON file and build it. And I'm going to access that configuration. So I can so it says hello world dev. And I come in here and I can change this to prod and rerun it. So now I've got configuration. So I'm pulling in the JSON file, I've built my config, and I'm just referencing it. Configuration blah. Very basic, just pulling in a string. We can add environment variables, and that's add environment variables. It's pretty much this easy to start adding additional bits of configuration if you're trying to add it and layer it in yourself, and you have precedence. So if I do the same thing, if I come in here and do environment variables, says dev. I can change this to QA. I've still got my QA there, but what if I want to do this? I want to set an environment variable. I don't know if you guys know Unix very well. Like that is setting an environment variable that's being passed only to the command I'm running. Like I'm not setting it to the whole system. I'm just saying, hey, for this one command, set this environment variable called environment to prod. So even though my configuration has QA, I said, go get the values out of my config file and then update them with my environment variables. So now I can see precedence. I can start seeing that there's an order to things. And we can add in command line. So again, I can just quickly kind of play around with these in different ways. So I can set an environment variable for QA. I can run it without that. And then I can even I got to do the dash dash. So I can have all three happening at the same time, but last one in wins. Okay. Let's say we want to like do some testing with stuff. And I'm going to move on to more complex things. I don't want to waste too much time, but We can add an end memory collection. So this I'm going to do later in some testing examples. We can just add variables into a memory collection and just use that directly so that we don't need to have files. So this is ideal for testing scenarios where we want to do some in-memory sort of stuff. And again, it's just another, it's part of configuration. Now, who uses user secrets? You should be using user secrets. We're going to talk about it more. But user secrets, when you activate them, they're part of .NET, they're in Visual Studio, they're in the CLI. You can see here there's a user secret ID. So if you use the solution, let me go ahead and open a solution. I don't have one open. So in VS Code, if you use the C# dev kit and you have a solution, you can right-click on it and do manage user secrets. And this will actually go out to where the user secrets are. So if you'll notice, this is in a like .Microsoft user secrets GUID file. Now, user secrets are outside your Git repo. So you won't accidentally check in any connection strings or secrets that you store. They're still on your file system. They're still on your laptop. So if you use user secrets and you lose your device and someone knows where to look, they can go find all the secrets. They're on there. But the idea behind this is these are dev time things that you don't want checked in. So using user secrets, they're still in your user directory. They're still protected somewhat, but they're not checked in your repo. And you can see, like I had a way to quickly edit it there. There's also all the command line ways to do user secrets. So user secrets, you just kind of do a user secrets init on a project, and then you can do user secrets set. So user secrets set will store those to my secret store. And again, if I go back to the Solution Explorer and I go to the user secrets one and I manage my user secrets, see it stored that setting in that file. Any setting I do, it's just like a normal JSON file. It just gets serialized and deserialized. It's not encrypted. It's plain text on there. So just be aware of that, but it's not in your repo. And then it just behaves just like everything else. So if I .NET run the project, and I realize everyone's recovering from their lunch, so thrilled, everyone. So secret hello. So this came from that user secret that I set. Let's move on. Another awesome thing that I love is we can do command line options with like wrappers and helpers so that we don't have to write like some really weird complex stuff. Notice I have in this file, I have a nested configuration. So I have greeting and I have a color. And what's fun with this one, if we run this real quick, see we can change the color. So if I do like color or greeting color equals blue, I can change the color. Now, I'm thinking about like, oh, I have to know the structure of my config. I have to know how it's nested. Like, that's not good to know. Like I'm revealing too much of the internal stuff. But now, with these command line arguments, I can actually override that and just present you with something that makes it easy for you to do. And you don't know about any of the backing configuration for it. So I have this mapping of color that maps to this nested key. And when I add in my command line, I can give it the mappings I want to provide so that it's like, hey, when you see these command line arguments, actually it means this super nested like property thing down here that people don't need to know about. I'm still accessing it in my code the exact same way, but it is like an interface to hide that for users of your application. Now, there are some awesome command line utilities, libraries for .NET. Like, this is not a replacement for that, but like if you're just doing minimal stuff, it's baked in to the configuration system. And then yeah, just when we're accessing these, we're just going to use those colons to go into the different sections, the nesting and the hierarchy. Any questions so far on like the basics? So we're starting to see how it's starting to come together, all the ways it's improving. Now let's start looking at some more interesting ways of working with this. Yep, all right. So maybe I have a setting, it should have been this one. Maybe I have a project I'm going to build, and I want to have a whole bunch of settings. I want to make a markdown converter. And I'm like, hey, I want to be able to convert to PDF. I want to be able to convert to doc and HTML. Well, like maybe I want to print stuff out. Like this is a way. It's a little repetitive and not keeping it simple. So what if we kind of start using those sections? We start breaking things down into repeatable sections. We want to try to have some sort of reusability. Well, I can still print out everything by these types, but I start realizing, hey, I'm doing the same thing over and over again. What's a way I can improve stuff? Well, what if we keep that same config file, but now, what if we try to work with a class, something like a file options, and we bind it? So I kind of showed this in the slides, but I have a class, and this is just like web API parameters that you want to have a constructorless class. You want public properties that can be setting, and so this will instantiate it and then assign all the properties when you bind it. So I can say, hey, go look for the section HTML. Go find that in the nesting, and then give me one of them. Like go find it, make a new objects class, and return that to me. That's what like get section PDF bind. So you can see I have a couple of different ways. So bind will take an object you already have and populate it. So if you already have a class and you want to fill it with configuration, you bind. If you don't have an object already and you want to get a new one, you get. Make sense? Yeah. But now I can have a strongly typed method that I can pass that object into, and I can start using this instead of repeating myself over and over again. So I can start using my config intelligently. All right, let me look at this one. Screwed up the order a little bit, but that's okay. So let's go talk about options. Who's heard of the options pattern or used it? Okay, a couple of you guys. We're going to go into this. This might be something you already know. Hopefully we'll learn one or two things. So this is letting us separate concerns. Like we don't want to usually depend directly on configuration. Like just depending right on an iConfig, we don't need all of that. We really just need a small subset of that in most of our classes and services. So we can separate things. We can have dependency in place. So that file thing is an example of maybe an options class, a non-abstract public parameter constructor, read-write properties, and then we can do things with it. There's these things called IOptions. I'm going to show you them. I've got demos to talk about them. But we've got an IOptions, an IOptions snapshot, and an IOptions monitor. These are the three ways that we can kind of interact with these. Some are singletons, some support reloading, and some support named options. We're going to talk about all three of those in case you're not familiar. And there are some performance concerns, but we're going to come back to those. So I'm running this application now. Let's see if it loads. Okay. So this is an ASP application, and I have this method here. So let me just go down into the page just to show you this providers page just real quick. I actually take a config root that gets directly injected. So I'm actually just getting the configuration injected into my page through the dependency injection. And I run, hey, just select all the providers off of the configuration. I just want to see all the providers that are in my system. And then I pretty much just print that out. And if we look, this is like the order that they come through. So like I got this memory configuration provider, and there's the settings for ASP.NET Core. It's going to pull those environment variables just for configuring ASP. It's going to pull those for .NET. We've got our JSON objects, including our app settings and our secrets from user secrets. We've got all these different providers. These are like baked into .NET New Web, Web API. But let's get to our app. So I've got all this configuration here, and if I go look at how that's implemented, that was injected config. I've pretty much taken that configuration. I get it injected, and I say, hey, for each section, give me a file options, and then I just kind of add it and print it out. I'm pretty much just printing out each one. So I can work with configuration directly. I can get a whole configuration. I can just inject it. But let me go back one. Let's look at IOptions. So it still has the same type of printing, but let's look at the injected IOptions. So you'll notice I have a class here now. Like I don't have a configuration, I have a class, a markdown converter, and I have an IOptions of markdown converter. That I depend on, hey, I need a thing called markdown converter, inject it for me. The way that gets set up is in our program CS. And I'm just going to quickly show you, here's the file options, we got bools and strings, here's our markdown, we have a couple of different classes of those. And then in my program CS, let me turn on wrapping if I can. Word wrap. There we go. I'm configuring markdown converter on this section of my config. So this one line of code registers the dependency injection of my configuration for me, like of the markdown converter IOptions. Like this one line will register that. So in my code, where I'm depending on it, I just say, hey, I want a markdown converter IOptions. But those two lines do it all. And I can just use the value of it, and I have a settings, and in my settings, like, hey, I'm just saying, hey, go through the, my settings and print out the stuff. I'm just intentionally doing that. Okay, that's an injected IOptions. What about Snapshot? Well, very similar thing. I say IOptions Snapshot. I don't have to do a different line to register in my program CS. Once I've done the configure this type on this config section, I get all three in the dependency injection engine. So I can ask for whichever one I want. You notice this time I'm still saying markdown value, and then I print it out the exact same way. It's all the same. Then we look at, back up, look at one more, IOptions monitor, and if we look at this guy, now things are different. So if we look at the monitor, IOptions monitor, same thing, but it's now current value. So I have to get the current value of the thing when I run it. Why does that matter? Well, that matters because of reloading support. So let's just look at that real quick. So PDF is true right now, right? So I'm going to go into my settings, and I'm just going to change, I'll change this to Azure DevOps, and I will say false. Save. And I'll just come over here and refresh. And I didn't restart my app, but PDF is now false. And it says Azure DevOps. Still same app. Haven't killed it. It didn't force a recycle. Who's ever had that happen to their framework, application? You touch the config and suddenly the whole site dies? Yeah. So monitor just automatically updated. What about Snapshot? Yep, Snapshot automatically updated. They both support reloading. What about options? Nope. Does not support reloading. Because one of the things to be aware of is this gets created when you instantiate it. So as soon as it's instantiated, like that's the config value it gets stuck with. Doesn't support reloading. These two do support reloading. And notice I didn't do anything else. Like there's no other lines to tell it to reload or config. Like this is out of the box. Here's my web application, configure markdown. That's it. Didn't do any other lines to force the reload stuff. So now let's talk about named options just real quick. Well, actually, let me talk about services. So injected service still says PDF true. So why is that? Well, I'm adding a transient iExport service. Like I want a new export every time you do a request. That should have the latest config, right? Like it's going to make a new one every time. But if I go look into my service, it depends on IOptions. So even though I'm making a new export service every request, it's using a static IOptions that was created with the old value. So I can fix this. So the reason I kind of have this example in here is it's very easy to think you're doing the right thing, but if you accidentally depend on the wrong service, like if you have the wrong dependency in place, what might happen is it doesn't work like you think it works and you're getting the wrong answers. So if I come back in here and I change these back to GitHub, and now I refresh my injected service, my service is now getting the transient config data. It's not getting that static data that's not being upset. So just be aware of your dependency chain. Like if you somewhere down the chain depend on an IOptions, you might be wondering why it didn't auto reload. I fought that one night, and I was like, oh yeah, like I thought I'd solved it, and I didn't. Now there is something to be very aware of, performance. So there are some performance considerations between the two. The snapshot is usually better for web apps. The monitor is usually good for long-running background processes. They kind of have some different performance characteristics, so just be aware of them. And I didn't cover the named thing, so let me do the named thing real quick as well, because that is also very interesting. So named options, and again, I just had the order a little bit wrong. That is not it. Config. Huh, I must have moved it around. So named options. I'm kind of annoyed is that in here? I didn't think it was in there. Sorry, I had moved some demos around specifically to try to help everybody make more sense, and I think I moved the wrong demo around. So essentially with a named option, you are going to, you can register essentially the same class multiple times. So I need a file options configuration object, but I want 3 of them. One named PDF, one named doc, and one named HTML. Like you pretty much say register it with this name. And maybe that's an HTTP endpoint, maybe that's a special class, maybe that's whatever. And what happens is in your IOptions, this doesn't work. Like you can't do file options get, which is the thing that you normally would want to do. What you can do though is, in like your snapshot, you can say, hey, I'm going to get an IOptions snapshot of file options. Like I still want the IOptions snapshot, but I want you to get me the PDF one, or I want you to get me the doc one. So you can request the specific object you want. And that's named options. And it's only supported by Snapshot and Monitor, not the basic IOptions. All right, so testing. I like to do a lot of testing. So we can use it for, I use the in-memory a lot. So using it for like unit tests, having in-memory collection, you can use it for integration testing as well. And we can do data annotations and configuration validation. So a problem I had a lot with .NET Framework, and I started having with modern .NET when I didn't know about this, was your application would start up and it would run fine, and then you get to a page that, or a service or something that had a configuration setting that you forgot to set, and then it would blow up at runtime 10 minutes later, an hour later, some amount of time later, because of a missing config value. Anybody had that problem before? Starts up fine. Hey, I got the home page. Everything's good. Click, now it blows up. So what if we can fix all of that? What if we can do awesome, interesting things like validation? I'm a big fan of that. So what if I have a webhook setting file? Anyone know data annotations? I love these things. So I can have my class and I can say, hey, this URL is required. Hey, there's a regex here. It needs to be at least 20 characters. Hey, I want a number between 0 and 3. So now, this makes life a whole lot easier. You know, I can try to run things, and if I go and look at this guy, I got a URL, I got a name, it's enabled. You know, I want it to at least retry one time. Why is it? Oh, I had set 0. So let me save that to 1. Let me restart things. And it won't start. So why don't we look at why it won't start? Option validation. Data validation, retry times must be between 1 and 3. It's telling me right now my config is wrong. So if I go look at my config, I didn't actually set retry times. So it defaulted to 0, which was acceptable before. So now I have to put some sort of retry time there. Starts up fine. So on startup, I can make sure my config is right using wonderful data validation stuff. So let's take a look at how we can do that. So I do the add options. Like I want to be able to have my webhook settings in dependency injection. And I want to bind it to that section name. Notice one of the little tricks I'm doing. I will a lot of times put a const string in my option that has the path or config section I care about. That way I don't fat finger it. Like I don't want magic strings floating around my code for here's my config section webhook. Like I want it to be the same, so I can say here's my config section webhook. Someone asked earlier, how do I know the options and document it? Well, if you document it in your code, then it makes life a little bit easier. And then I don't have to fat finger it because it's tied to the object I'm doing. Anyways, that's how I do it. So I can get all this stuff for free with the validate data annotations. I can also write my own validate. So I could just do an arbitrary thing if I want. Maybe I just want to say, hey, I don't want it to be less than 20 characters. That should have blown up. Let me double check. Did I save it? Might not have saved it. All right, well, things break. Webhook URL length. And you can also validate returns starts with HTTPS. So let's try that one. Make sure. There we go. Got that to blow up. So that one was my validate. So URL length is too short. Webhook must start with HTTPS. So I got multiple errors. They're all kind of listed there. Other fun thing we can do is this is what makes it validate on start. So you can have these validations, and they'll blow up when you try to access the property, maybe not on startup. So if I take this out and save it and make sure this is bad, it runs. But then when I do this, now I get the runtime error. We don't want the runtime error. We want it to validate on startup. That way you don't get this. Sounds good? Like this right here for me is like the price of admission. This thing is awesome. What if, you know, not only that, but you want to tweak it? What if you want to change your validation and modify config on startup? We can do that too. Yeah, I moved around a demo and it's annoying me. So sorry, I will clean that up for you guys after this. But in that same space, you can do like a post validate. You can also do like singletons to have classes to help you validate. So like if I want to validate options and I want to give it a validate webhook class, like I can have a class that goes through and does specific things in code without the data validations. If I had some really complex logic, maybe I needed to look up an endpoint or something. So you have a lot of different options to be able to play around with configuration and modify it. It really makes life a lot easier when dealing with this stuff. Yeah, like I said, I always try to do validate on start. I want to have good messages about what the error is. Secrets. Yeah, just make sure you don't store them in app settings. Make sure you don't commit them. Use some of these different techniques in dev and QA. So a lot of times people use Key Vault for a lot of their secret management. Again, I'm kind of moved away from that. I use RBAC and managed identities. So default Azure credential, managed identity credential, or using environment variables in Kubernetes or container apps. But like, let's say we want to do that. So let me go to Azure App Config. So Azure App Config is a nice one. I have a little script here. I create a Azure App Config. Has anyone used App Config? All right. App Config is nice in the fact that it is a cloud-based configuration provider. You can promote configuration between environments. You can have one connection string out to your app config, and it will pull in all the keys and load it into the config system just like everything else. So you don't need to kind of worry about managing things everywhere. You can manage it centrally in one spot. It supports like different keys. You can have, if you notice these keys, they have test app : settings : background color. So I can have the same hierarchy as I do locally. And then I can, these aren't secrets, so like I should be able to edit this guy. So this is background color white. So if I start this guy up and run it, we'll see some stuff. Did I not put the value? Oh, connection. I didn't put the value of my connection string. So I just really need my endpoint. I think that is, I just recreated this guy, so if you'll excuse me, yeah, I'll do that. Then I will set up my user secret or my environment variable. Oh, set. I always forget the word. User secrets set. And I need to do an equal, or I need to do a space, not an equal. you deal with enough commands, eventually you get it right. Come on. Oh, minus project. Have to do it to the right project. See, now it runs. Now I have a user secret. Runs fine. All right. From Azure App Config, you got a white background. Well, what if instead of a white background, I would like a different background? Maybe I'm going to come in here and I'm going to edit this one to a black background. I'm going to edit the font color to something so that we can read it. Instead of black on black, we'll do white. And let's go see what happens. Nothing. So the reason this doesn't happen is, like, if we were constantly checking every config all the time, it would overload the system probably, or send tons and tons of requests. So you just need to have some sort of, I have it set up to have some sort of value called Sentinel. And if we look in our code, we're going to see, I'm going to set my Azure App Config, I'm going to give it the connection string, and I'm going to set it up to refresh. So every 5 seconds, it's going to check that Sentinel key, and if it changes, it's going to go update all the other settings. That way, I'm not checking all the keys all the time. It just looks for one, and when I edit that one, it should then refresh everything. Like that. So app's still running. I didn't change anything in the settings. I can manipulate it through here. And this is where I can do snapshots. I can roll back configuration. They also do feature flags. I do a talk on feature flags where I can create like a feature flag for like a new portal or something. And I can give it a label of this is in QA. I can tie it to telemetry. You can apply a filter. So, you know, maybe I want somebody targeted, or I want to roll out a Black Friday or holiday deal, and I don't want to have to push code to enable it on my retail site. I make a feature flag, and it only turns on during the holiday, and it turns back off. I didn't have to push code. Like, this feature flag will automatically turn on and off on its own. Like, cool stuff, and it just shows up in my code, and I can access it, and I don't have to, like, I access it just like every other config. App config is config. Feature flags are config. It's all config. And it's all in the same system. Like, isn't that cool? Like, everything's unified. Sorry, I get excited. This stuff's cool. And the same with like Key Vault. So I set up Key Vault earlier. Hey, yeah, go get my Key Vault name. Hey, go add a Key Vault. Using my identity, AZ login. I use the Key Vault. Cool. I got messages from Key Vault. Like, it's the same as every other thing. I don't care. I don't care where it is. Don't care. All right. Be careful logging stuff. Don't log everything, because like it can have the connection strings and all that if you just log everything. Don't log them directly. Try to use the monitors. Who's heard about Aspire? Who? Yeah, Aspire's cool. Aspire's cool. Do you know it's built on like all the things that are in .NET already, like configuration? Yeah. So I like Aspire. I do a couple talks on it. Let's just do, I don't need to do that one real quick. Yeah, let's do that. I'll just do Aspire run. They came out with a CLI in Aspire 9.4. They had it in beta in like 3 and stuff. Aspire, typically you're going to have a couple of projects. You're going to have an app host project, which is the infrastructure, the dependencies of your application. And then you're going to have a service defaults, which is going to have a lot of cool things in it. And then you're going to have your projects. So in this particular case, I have an API service, and I have a website that depends on the API service. Like, it just does it with a reference. Like, that's all you do. Just say, hey, I have a reference to that, wait for this. I can do like dot, like with environment variable, like I can give an environment variable. Guess what? It'll inject an environment variable into my website. Guess what that does? It pulls it into the environment variable, so it's in my config. So here in this one spot, I can start wiring up things and passing values and have one app settings that I have in my app host, and I push that value down into my various projects. The other cool thing, like I said, service defaults. It does open telemetry, does health checks, does retry and resiliency, and does this things called service discovery. Aspire has this cool feature called service discovery. And what that means is, in my website, where I say I depend on my API, I can do this. I can say, hey, the endpoint of my backend is API service. So when I'm running it locally and the IP is 127.0.0.1 on port 5000, I don't care. It's API service. When I deploy it to prod and it's running on an endpoint, I don't care. It's API service. But really, under the hood, see, this is the dashboard you also get with Aspire. If I come here and I go look at some details, I got my web front end running. Hey, I depend, I've got some endpoints, cool. Hey, I have a reference to API service, cool. Here's some environment variables. Remember those fun ones we talked about? ASP.NET Core? Yeah, we can see those. We can configure it with launch profiles, open telemetry for .NET. Look at this thing. Services underscore API service. So that name, that service discovery name, API service, really is just an environment variable that follows a pattern for Aspire to pick up. So one side registers the name, the other side picks it up. It's just a convention, all driven through configuration. So if you're ever debugging Aspire and you're like, how did they figure out that name? Go look at your environment variables. And you know the rest. We've already gone over it. Like, you know how all the environment variables work and they feed. And it's like, so 5461, if I come here and I look at this guy, 5461. Like, it's all wired together. Just environment variable magic. Also, this gives you like logs to your stuff. It's awesome that you can just go here. It also gives you structured logging. It also gives you traces. So if I'm on like my website and like clicking around doing things, and then I go back here and I look at my structured logs, I can look at my traces and get this, because OpenTelemetry is awesome. Go watch talks on OpenTelemetry. And I can see the individual requests and spans and data. And then, oh yeah, I might want to dig into metrics of the .NET system and just look at them. Did I mention you get this for free, Aspire? Yeah, go learn Aspire. It's awesome. It's the future. It's the way of the future. All right, so orchestration. So I can add dependencies like Cosmos, and I can add dependencies like storage accounts, or backend endpoints, or Docker containers. And so what's really, really, really cool about that is it'll figure it out. Like, these are called like iResources, and when you register them and you have the dependencies, some of them will spit out connection strings. Some of them will spit out endpoints. Some of them will spit out different things based upon the resource type. They all just get sent through as environment variables. So you can go figure them out. And then you have like per service app settings. You can have environment variable app settings, and then you can call the app post to pass more environment variables in. Like, it gives you a way of thinking about things. App host is where infrastructure configuration and options that affect deployment live, and then your individual applications have stuff. I got a few more demos, and then we got like 5 minutes, so if you guys have questions, I'm happy to talk about them. Yeah, like I have some testing samples in here. So you can see doing a builder, doing configuration root. So we can get some builder stuff, and then we can add in settings and validate the files. We can, yeah. It's like there's so much fun that you can do with this stuff. And it really is awesome. Like, I'm gonna set up some key value pairs and add it to an in-memory collection, and then I'm gonna assert stuff. Like, it's easy to pass these things and do these things. So again, I'm kind of at time. I got a couple minutes, but questions, anybody? Or I'll just keep, yes. Yeah. Yep. Yep. It's usually just one line, like, and that's typically what you're going to see is that you're going to have to register, like you have to be intentional to, like this is the one line that you need. The uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you do have to register, like you do have to say like I want to, like for dependency injection to work. Like if you don't want dependency injection to work, if you just say I configuration, you can access any property anywhere, but it's probably going to be accessed as a string, like when you say give me this one in brackets. If you want to have strongly typing and you want to do data annotations on it, then there is 1 or 2 lines you need to add to be intentional about this standard, like this class, this strongly typed class equates to this configuration part. Like you have to tell it that. You don't want to infer it. When you have the system infer a type, that's where bad things happen. Log4j and bin serializer, like these are where problems lie. Yeah. 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 Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah.
It's more related to the Aspire part.
Yeah.
Is that something that's primarily for the development environment, or is it also something that you deploy out?
So I actually write a production service inside Microsoft, and we're using Aspire to do that. There is a, like this generates bicep and ARM templates for our code. So like when I change my app host and I say I'm going to add a Cosmos, or I add a different property setting, or I customize my infrastructure to disable public network access, and I do publish, it'll generate the bicep, like it might work with AZD. You're going to see, I'm at .NET Aspire. There is, in the Aspire documentation, the publish and deploy on like how to build those images and how to deploy it out. But it does affect, like it's primarily for development environments where I hit F5 and it spins up all my containers and all my services and all my resources, and it's wired up for me, ready to go. But you can deploy that architecture out so that you don't have to write it all. Like Aspire already knows everything, and you can deploy it to a dev, a QA, a prod. I'm doing it in a pipeline every day. So, yeah. And, yeah.
Is there a difference between registering IOptions, or you can also register a singleton of the settings class? Because
I would recommend not registering the whole settings class. Like you already get, like in any class you can say, I need an I configuration. You can do that. But if you need one chapter of a book, and every time you ask for configuration, you get a whole book. It's like, here you go, here you go. Now you have to pick through all the stuff. Like, you really want to talk about single responsibility. So you want to have a strongly typed class that is only the settings and configuration you need for your service to run, not everything else, and have it small, self-contained, and isolated. It'll be faster, and it'll be more efficient, and it will have less chance for bigger problems of leakage.
I meant more like you can get a section, you can bind it.
Yep.
You can also bind just like one section, right? Like
Yeah.
one section, and then just register that as a singleton, and then just use that to make sense.
I'm going to let the backend do it, because as soon as you bind the configuration section, it already knows that you want to, like you do configuration on it. It already knows you're going to request stuff. If you do want a singleton, you can use IOptions, and it's already baked in. Like you don't need another class doing another thing. with another registration. And anybody else? Like 1 or 2 more questions? Yes.
Just a quick question. If you do the validation part
Mm-hmm.
and reloading, how does that work? If it breaks,
Yeah.
then not reload, or does it break the app?
It's up to you. Like, depending upon how you want to do it. Like, you can make it so it will blow up on a bad configuration. Like, if the configuration was valid and you change it to invalid, yeah, like, I mean, we can try it. Or, I mean, the code's out there. I haven't tried that one, but like, one, you probably shouldn't be manipulating it like that. Like, it's a cool thing, but like, if you need to update it live, you can. But if you turn on, I'm going to blow up on startup, you have to accept, like, maybe it's a container, and you want the container to fail early every time you deploy it with a bad config. That way you know that version is bad and you want to go back to a previous version and it won't transfer traffic to that. So like, find the right use cases. So failing super early on config is great in a containerized environment. If it's a long-running web server that you're maintaining, maybe not. Like, these are tools. There's tons of tools. It's just a lot of people don't know they exist. Last question, anybody? All right. Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. Grab a handful of greens on your way. I mean, one green on your way out. And don't forget, we got some stickers on the front chair up here. Azure Chaos Studio, Playwright, and Azure Load Testing. Yes?
Thank you for your talk.
Oh, I'm glad you liked it.